Replacing the starter and steering column on an old Craftsman lawnmower. William Hovey Smith, 2022. This is Hovey Smith, the Backyard Sportsman. And we are now revisiting this old Craftsman lawnmower that belonged to my late brother-in-law. In previous videos, we have replaced his starter motor and are about to do it again because the replacement motor is shot, and I'll show you how and why. And we are also going to install a new steering column. This one has a quarter turn of freewheeling steering, which of course is not desirable. And we have the replacement parts in hand now and are going to tackle it. We're also going to continue our general cleaning up and making ready to run. And one of the things we've exposed for the first time is the top of the carburetor. And it is heavily encrusted with filth all around it. And we're going to carefully and gingerly remove that and clean it up so it doesn't get in the carburetor. So we'll show you some of this as we go along. The main offender is why this thing doesn't presently run after it did. As you can see, the teeth on the starter motor, they are just completely eroded away except for very few little tabs down there at the bottom. And the problem was one of design and materials used in this replacement motor. They were of a tough plastic, but in this design, that top never did retract as it should have, and consequently was in contact with the flywheel teeth all the time the motor was running. And it ran so far as the starter teeth would take it. But the metal teeth on the flywheel ultimately just eroded that starter completely away. This is a carburetor now that it's exposed. And you can see the gunk encrusted all around it. And that's basically oil-soaked dust and fine sand. And I'm going to get that off the outside. But before I do anything, I'm going to stuff a rag down that carburetor throat to keep any loose material from getting inside. Grime has so encrusted this poor carburetor, it's almost very difficult to see what part is what anymore. These thin springs and linkages, you don't want to be too aggressive here. Look, we scraped off the carburetor a little bit, and now you can at least see some of the components. And we've also moved more or less a pound of oil and gasoline soaked dirt and dust and grime from the outside of it. That stuff probably has enough petroleum byproducts in it to actually burn. So I certainly want to blow all this off the engine before I start this thing again. Make your own job, anytime, anywhere, at any age. A business book for everyone. Create your own job ideas, raise immediate cash, make a better job where you work, copyright your work, patent your inventions, form your own company, plan for a fun retirement business, and leave a legacy. The Kirkus Review of Books considered this a worthy book for the newbie entrepreneur, and the U.S. Review of Books put it on their recommended list. Make Your Own Job, Anytime, Anywhere, at any age is a softcover, e-book, audiobook, and is available from booksellers worldwide. The starter is retained by long half-inch bolts, one of which is here and one of which is underneath here on the inside. So we're going to pull this one right quick. Now its mate on the underside is the difficult one. And that's best got at with one of these. But you can only get about a quarter turn at a time. Okay, I got it broke at least. And so on until you loosen it enough to get in there with the fingers, if your fingers are small enough, and pull it the rest of the way out. We have our old unit here on the left with the worn out teeth, and the new unit here on the right with the new teeth. But you're not imagining things. That is a slightly slimmer and shorter body. However, the part that engages the flywheel is exactly the same composition, and I suspect we'll have much the same result. The fault of the first one was that gear did not drop down and disengage when the motor was running. If this one does not as well, I have no reason to believe it would last any longer. So if you buy one of these units, take a very close look at that component. They're available from several manufacturers. If it is a metal component there at the top that engages the flywheel, it might be worth having. These, from present results, are frankly not at any price, unless you want to do this again and again. Well, we now have the 2021 version of this starter attached versus a starter made in 2020. An examination showed that spring, which is supposed to push that plastic gear downward, was very weak on the other starter and is a little bit stronger on this one. We're going to clean up and get the engine reassembled again before we start on the steering column. Now that I have the air cleaner back on, I can go ahead and blow off some of this accumulated junk that I've loosened, as well as what's settled on it since the start of turkey season. Our pollen, as usual, is still with us. One thing about having things sitting out in the weather here in the South is you're going to get colonized. And that's a paper wasp busily making a new nest, which of course I don't particularly want in my lawnmower. So, fella, I appreciate your hard work, but I'm afraid you and that nest are going to have to go. Now that we have the starter motor installed and everything tested, and that works, we're going to remove the battery as well as the steering column so we can replace it. To do this, you have to take the steering wheel off its mounting, its shields, and also rotate that top piece of metal back, and then you can access the underside where we need to remove 4 bolts and take out the steering column itself. Starting at the top, I've removed the cover, and you can see that bolt that sticks out in that very large washer. That comes off, and then the steering wheel will lift straight out. Immediately beneath, you see this metal fitting that just slides straight off the column. If I remove that flash plate, I'm hoping I'll be able to get that shaft out without having to disassemble and remove this entire top assembly and all the controls and everything else. I think I can do it. Here you come. All right, good boy. Yes, I think it will. Looks like they give me enough room there for doing exactly that. Okay, that'll work. Removing the retaining screws from the control panel allows me to get a little more room so I can more handily remove the battery and the other components. And I need to do that so I can more readily get to the connections that holds that shaft to the frame. Now that we've got the battery out, there are 2 screws on either side of that battery support plate. And I'm going to remove those and remove that plate so we can actually get a less obstructed shot at removing the shaft. The battery support plate is ready to come out, but it's going to be a wiggle and jiggle to get it out. Because you don't want to interfere with all of your electrical connections in here too. Okay. All right, there we go. Well, surprisingly enough, that's actually pretty solid. Thanks, I suppose, to that plastic plate on the bottom of the battery tray. Before I do the guy thing and start putting a wrench to every nut and bolt I can get a hold of, took a look at the thing I'm going to be installing. And as it turns out, this has its linkages already done, so there's no need to disassemble the components inside. What I need to do is there are 4 bolts to remove from the bottom, and also 1 on the linkage arm, and then I'll be able to connect it up. Our steering column is now loose. It was retained by 4 of these self-threading screws, and I'm going to replace these with conventional nuts and bolts because I cannot physically index that plate and screw from the bottom at the same time. It's just a physical impossibility. So, hopefully, this should be removable now. In some fashion or other. And perhaps like so. So we have the old part out, now to replace with a new. Although I appreciate you can't see very much of it, we did put in our new nuts and bolts here, and we replaced 2 of those self-threading nuts because we just couldn't get to them from the top side. And we also attached our control arm over here, so now we are through underneath, thank God, and can do the cosmetic work and put together on the top side. Now that we replace the steering column assembly, we can go ahead and do the bolt up and air up and clean up and get our critter back in the woods again. We're installing our battery plate support shelf back in, and we'll re-clean these connections and fastenings whilst we're fooling with the battery. Before we complete our assembly, I'm going to go ahead and do an electrical check and make sure we have everything going. We should hear some sounds of activity. Yep. That's good. All right, all the electrical system works and the battery's in, and so we'll now push the console back in place and replace the steering wheel assembly. As is not unusual, we ran into a slight problem. When we were fitting this sleeve on the shaft, we found that the through bolt here, the holes did not line up. So consequently, I had to fit a smaller nut and bolt. And fortunately, in my miscellaneous collection of nuts and bolts and screws and washers, etc., I cobbled together a combination that would fit. So although the steering wheel will stand a little taller than it used to, I don't think that's going to be any real problem. This piece here had wiggle in it this way, and I shimmed it with two little pieces of aluminum foil that you perhaps can see the edges of sticking out right there. And so that helped that considerably. So we now replace the wheel. But yay. And its retaining washer here okay, that's good. And finally, little nameplate. And we are reattached now. We have been successful in our endeavors. On the third crank, roof, little black smoke, started. I have completed another rehabilitation phase of the Craftsman L9 lawnmower. And my intention is to take it turkey hunting this afternoon. It wants to run, it needs to work, so we're going to put it to work. Now the lawnmower deck on this lawnmower is pretty well shot, but still functional. And I may yet, after turkey season, reinstall it. The lawnmower, however, is not safely operable yet. The fact is, it has no brakes, which I found out the hard way. Well, my level lawn, it does just fine. Goes down hills great, climbs them great. You just can't stop at the end of the hill. Well, that's sort of significant sometimes. So in another episode, we'll probably order and put in some new brakes if we can identify and actually get the parts. But now, this is Hovey Smith, reminding you to hunt what you eat and eat what you hunt. Be legal, be ethical, be safe. Goodbye, God bless, and see you next time. Most replacement parts for these old lawnmowers are now provided by aftermarket makers and are sometimes difficult to match up with the older mowers. Fortunately, nearly identical components were used by several brands. The free travel steering problem is something seen to varying degrees on nearly all of these older Craftsman mowers. The replacement of the steering assembly is a fairly simple process on these older mowers. I like the Craftsman mower because of the robust nature of its steel frame and body. For more information about my books, blogs, and over 900 videos, go to my website, hoveysmith.com. To find out about my business books, go to MakeYourOwnJobSecurity.com. To learn how my novel, screenplay, and movie project is coming along, go to FatherOfTheGrooms.net. Hunt what you eat and eat what you hunt. Goodbye and God bless.